We're very fortunate to have 7 artists who are exhibiting in the show come and have a chat with us, talk about their artwork. But before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Brubberling people of the Gunma-Kurnai Nation, and pay our respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. So you'll have to forgive me because I have to read out the names because there's too many of you. And I actually didn't meet everyone last night. So we've got Evangeline, we've got Sue, Robin, Josephine, Linda, Jem and Tamara. And I'm lying because Robin isn't here, I don't think.
No, she's not here.
No, it's beautiful. Oh. So, welcome everyone. Everyone was at the opening last night. Hope you all enjoyed yourself. Yeah, awesome, good. We're really lucky to have this exhibition here. I think you spoke last night about coming to me about 4 or 5 years ago and just saying, I want to hold this contemporary art prize, and of course I just went, yes, of course, we'll have it here. Yeah, of course, we'll exhibit international artists in our small little gallery, and it's grown so much from 3 years ago or 2 years ago. We had to put it off because of COVID. Yeah. But the variety of work. I mean, you have to agree, it is amazing. And as someone who is not really familiar with textile art, I think I'm really quite impressed and amazed by the variety, the other mediums that are incorporated, the ideas behind the pieces, and it's been a real joy to read the artist statements and the bios and to look at the work and get to know it up close and actually get to touch it. It's really, not that I recommend anyone do it. You're not allowed to touch things, all right? But to have that experience of installing work and being able to touch it, it's so tactile and and I really enjoyed it. But the reason we are here today is because we want to listen to the artists talk about their work and their inspiration and their love, I suppose, of the medium and the craft. Yeah. And it's important to acknowledge that it's a craft. This is something that's, is developed over many, many years. It's technique-based, it's technically based, and I have real respect for that. Yeah. So we're going to get started. I'm going to do Evangeline last. Sorry, Evangeline, because Evangeline's piece is actually in the sideshow gallery, which is right over there. And as the artists talk about their work, we're going to have a bit of a look at the piece, and just by chance all of them are in here except for Evangeline, so I'll go get it and I'll bring it in. Right, so first up, I've got my notes. We are going to hear from Sue. Ta-da! You're the lady I didn't meet last night. I'm so sorry. There's so many people here and I didn't want to tap everyone on the shoulder and say, are you an exhibiting artist? Yeah, so thank you so much for coming. So this is your piece over here on the far one on the wall there. So if you'd like to kind of begin with, probably introducing yourself and also your background, and how you got into fibre art, and then discuss the piece, of course. Okay, thanks, Ed.
Thank you. Oh, okay. Well, I started fibre arts at the age of 6. I hadn't planned to start my little chat this way. Mum taught me to embroider. I remember embroidering, those stamped on designs. Does anyone remember that? Mum, it was a chicken with some little bits of wheat, and the little wheat grains were French knobs. That's pretty hard to do when you're 6 or 7. So that was my beginning. So I've always sewn because my mother had always sewn. I even embroidered a shoe bag. I can't believe I did that. My school shoe bag. So yes, I've always worked with needle and thread. I trained as a home economics teacher, and part of that was teaching textiles. So I continued that expertise, and I've done lots of workshops in the meantime. I've been to some apprentices, and so it's been an ongoing learning experience. As I've got older, I've acquired family textiles, old blankets, rugs, pillowcases, pillow shams, tea towels. I've got cupboards full of them. I can't let them go, and I'm using them in my work. So this particular piece is Mum's, it's her ironing blanket, and she had that all my life, and I'm in my early 70s, and I had a brother who was a few years older than me, and I can't believe she would have used a new blanket. So the blanket's got to be about 100 years old. It was always folded up in the cupboard, folded up in four, and she would have it with a sheet on top, and she'd just throw it in the cupboard. I did try to buy her an ironing board, but she didn't want to use it. So I like the fact that it's got markings there, and I think that that's all the years that Mum used that blanket. There's all the staining and marks that have come from the heat and from the water. I was just thinking she didn't even have a steam iron for years. She just sprinkled water and then ironed. Oh, some of you, I was thinking people won't know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So I felt I had to use it, and then I thought, well, how am I going to use it? And I come from Stawell, which is in the Wimmera, and I do a lot of bushwalking, and I've been concerned about how the environment's changing. It's very obvious if you live in the country. You can see the trees are getting thin, the rivers are drying up, and so it suddenly occurred to me a pressing issue. It describes the use of the blanket and this issue that I wanted to explore. So it actually became a diary, and I wrote down notes. Some of them I got out of the Stawell Times News, or just ideas out of the paper, some out of the Age, and in the end, because it went over a few years, it culminated with the fires on the east coast of Australia. That was kind of the zenith of the whole thing. So I just thought I'd say, so there were concerns about the Wimmera River. They're concerned about maintaining the fish population. They're worried about water creatures including platypi, tortoises, crayfish and frogs. And then in 1918, the capital of Sydney and Melbourne both recorded temperatures which were close to record highs, and then we finished off with the bushfires. So I was just jotting down notes, and then when I started to try and put it on the blanket, I thought I'll do formal writing. I'll do the cursive script that I was taught at school. Somehow I thought, no, this isn't enough of me. So I thought, no, I'll just do the way I scribbled it into the book. So that's why the writing is so terrible. And I overlapped it. I was going to do it like that, with the script very neatly under each line. It just didn't look right, because that's not what my workbook was like. It was a mess. So I thought I'll overlap it. So it's hard to read, but it meant a lot to me at the time. And even now I find it hard to read. So it was how I was feeling over a period of about 2 years. And then by the time we got to the fires on the east coast, if you look at the top there, I wrote down the word climate change on a piece of paper and just visually with my eye, just took aspects of each letter. And I've just learned from Josephine that what I was doing was called a scenic.
Oh,
sorry. So it's my new word. It's a scenic. So it's just writing that's all broken up, but I know it means climate change in bits. What else would you like to know? Oh, and some of the thread is hand dyed, the black and white thread, the colour changes, and I just wanted everything to be a bit uneven. So there's nothing perfect there, but that's the story of that blanket. Is there anything else that you'd like to know?
Any questions?
Oh, and I used a strange stem stitch. I tried using, I do quite a bit of embroidery, so I know a lot of stitches. I wanted a flowing line. I think that must be stem stitch there. But I found when I was doing the tight little corners it wasn't working so well, so I improvised. So it's imperfect stem stitch that I used.
That's like a different language when you say things like that.
Is
Is this part of a body of work, or is it part of a body of work that you've been on, or is this a unique piece that was, something that came from you after the fires?
Yes, I realise now that just about every piece I have made in the last few years, I might add I'm not making many pieces because I'm doing a lot of grandmothering, but there's always something on the go. A lot of text is happening in my work now. A lot of it's relating to, I've just finished a piece that's very political. It's about the treatment of women in Canberra. Do you remember that? Was it 2020? On a very old garment that I found in Mum's linen cupboard called Combinations. Has anyone seen them?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Mum, she was still alive, but she couldn't tell me anything about the garment. So I'm using text on a lot to express my thoughts. They could be angry ones or worried ones or just how I feel at the time.
Yeah.
I do sometimes use printing of images onto fabric, and then I'll stitch over them. Not quite like that, but it's a similar idea. Just trying to think of the last few pieces that I've made. A lot of it's tied up with family history. The garments that I find in the cupboard or that I remember. But often there's another little punch that I'm delivering.
Yeah. Oh no, it's wonderful, and I think there's a number of pieces in this show that have incorporated text, and I think yours does it beautifully. It's really I don't know, this text, the adding of the text is it just gives work so much meaning, and you can look at and you can read the artist statements, but I think there's something different when you go into a piece and you look at the fact that you've made it look like your handwriting. Yeah, it's amazing. And I'll be honest with you, it was a struggle to read. It's different, like me and Mel were there, we're trying to decipher.
I didn't want it to be easy. I don't think you should give artwork to people on a plate. And anyway, everybody has their own take when they look at something, so I'll turn my hearing aid down now. Everybody brings their own personal package when you look at a piece of art. So people can walk up to that and they can see words and, what's this all about? But I didn't want it to be too easy.
Yeah.
Sorry, everybody.
Oh no, it's good because you understand it from the pieces that you can. Yeah. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Sue while we're here? No. Okay, lovely. We can ask lots of questions at the end anyway. So the next artist that is going to talk about their work and tell us a little bit about their background is Josephine Jacoby, the winner of the prize last night. So did you want to switch so you can speak about this? No, you're all good? Okay, all right. Thanks, Josie.
Yeah, I think this is more of a round conversation.
It is, yes.
I regard myself as being very fortunate to have lived in the one place on the edge of the forest in New York for a very long time and be part of an arts community that I hear comments from people from other places that say, oh, it's not like that where I come from. But here, the artists are very kind to each other. They're all supportive. They go to each other's shows. They buy each other's work. They look after each other in a really lovely way. And it's really heartwarming to be part of it, It's great. Plus, we've got this beautiful gallery that I've been part of since the beginning. And then we've got Crystal. Wow. Turned the place around, didn't she? Yeah, really good. And then along comes Glennis.
Oh. I know. What on earth? I know.
I hear the earthquake rumble, don't you?
That's so true.
Yeah, what a force of nature she is, and her energy and generosity are just monumental. I've never seen anyone anyone like that. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, Jess.
You've done some very good things around here, and this is one of the right up on the top of the list.
Thank you.
Because of where I live, I am engaged, and because of my background and so on, I'm engaged with the real world of ecology every day. And I have become, well, somebody introduced me to the phrase, the more than human world. You know, I thought that's perfect for what I'm talking about. So I use that a lot now, because that is what my artwork, all of it, is about, is this, that we are one species amongst many in a very complex world. And we are now so large and so numerous that we're having an effect on the planet, you know, so a really profound effect that we don't know where that's going, we just don't know. So the idea that I can use art, which I've always been a maker, I in midlife did I learn to call it art. Before that it was kind of I just make stuff. To use that to express this concern for that modern human world, it's really pleasing to me, you know, and I put it into everything I do. And I got involved with the idea of textile arts, which I'd not thought about at all, because of Glenys, who saw a show that I'd done and just immediately said, well, that's textile art, you know, that's what you're doing. And I thought, really? Really? And I've developed that idea that there's a long thread, a very long thread, that comes all the way from Ireland and probably England and maybe even a dash, you know, a fibre or two from France, that I learned I don't know any stitches in crochet, I don't know what to call them, I can't follow a pattern, I don't know what it is. I just saw my grandmother doing that, and I saw my mother doing that, and so, you know, I have to go and I can do it too. And I like to think of, that's how I put the domesticity into my work, because a lot of my work does involve jars of smelly seaweed and plants in glass and, you know, canvas that's been in the lake and all of this kind of thing. But this long thread stretches way back for who knows how long, because people, women in particular, have always been involved in the making of textiles. And so I think about my crochet thread, you know, stretching all that way back. And when I think hard about that and think about my subject matter, I realise that our domestic traditions are the driver of all things. All of our industry, all of our culture, everything that we do is driven by the domestic, because that's what in the end gets marketed to. We want a high standard of living, we want beautiful homes, we want to be safe and warm and dry and cool and all of those things. And we've pushed it to such a point that I think we have to start winding it back. I think we all have to accept a lower standard of living, if you call it lower. A more simple standard of living would be a better way of putting it. But underlying all of that is this domestic thread that I crochet and think of my little grandmother sitting on the floor with her legs stacked out in front of her, crocheting on double bedspreads, you know. It's there. So that's what I've done. I've acknowledged the more than human world, and I've crocheted just like my grandmother. And the history of it goes way back. Thank you. That's really interesting.
The space, because that's the way it moves.
Do you know, the last time I did a show here, like my solo show, Margaret asked me to explain the mechanism of hanging.
It was fabulous. Oh,
This is fantastic. Watch this.
This is an architectural principle called tensegrity, and the tense is the tension, and the integrity is the solidity, the firmness of the material. And I'd seen it online, you know, and thought, wow, how does that even work? And then when I was thinking about how am I going to display this little thing that I made, that needs some kind of reference to spider, you know, and I hunted out the tensegrity principle, and then I went to we've got a lovely plastics man in Chris Reed, he's just such a nice bloke. And he, you know, he didn't send me packing, he didn't say, oh, I haven't got time for that kind of rubbish. He said, oh, that looks interesting, off we go. So I'd drawn it up, I'd drawn it up pretty, you know, got my graph paper and drew it all up to scale and took it to him, and he made it, and we had to have another go because the first one wasn't that good. But he really did engage with it, and in the end we made a third one, which this one's this. This one's got an angle and it's got a bit of tension, but the whole weight of the thing is hanging from that centre thread. The threads on the outside are simply stabilising. So yeah, it's quite a remarkable little principle of tension and balance. You know?
I love that, Josie. When I studied craniosacral, they talked about biotensegrity, which is the skeleton, the ligaments, and the muscles all doing exactly that.
Yeah, right. Yes. Because it is tension, you know, it's tension against integrity. It's great. Yeah.
So the idea of the organic, the juxtaposition there between that and the that perspex and the really sharp edges.
Yeah.
What's the idea behind that? That strong contrast.
Well, I think that works in art. I think contrast works. I think very small and very large in the same room work really well. I think very soft and sharp also work. I think it's just a design element that I like. There's no, the only relationship the perspex, apart from being clear and not getting in the way too much, the only relationship it has is the fact that when you touch it, it will move like a spider. You know, it'll do this mysterious jiggle that spiders do. And given the you know, all of the little white, I meant to bring one so you could feel how tough they are, because you think, really, spiders can be so fragile. It's not fragile. I have put them in the pocket of my jeans and put them in the washing machine, and they come out faintly blue.
Through the washing machine.
Isn't spider web
It's very strong.
one of the strongest materials?
Yes, it is. It's a protein, and an extraordinarily strong protein. And these eggs are laid by, or made, built by also, there's all sorts of huntsman spiders, not just one sort, there's many different varieties of that. And they put these, the ones I find usually, have been under the bark of eucalypt trees in the forest. And then you get some wind or the bark sheds or something, and you walk around, oh, there's one, you know, oh, there's another, you know, and I pick them up. Over a long period of time, I've been doing this and using them. So, you know, I get a little basket with a whole lot of them in. I think I could make something now, you know, when you've got enough. But it is a very, very strong protein and really tough, and takes the stitching quite well. They do, if they've been on the forest floor for a long time, they become discoloured, but they also start to break down. And I suspect that other creatures nibble on them, because sometimes you find them and they're quite tatty and not quite usable. I have even gone to the extreme of patching them, so in desperation to get that last one to go, you know. Yeah.
Josephine, is there a reason for the shape of the textile? I can't see, it's a triangle.
It's a triangle. I think, yeah, shape's interesting, isn't it? I did a lot of work with hexagons, because I got fascinated by beads, and so I did a lot of work with hexagons, and triangles are an essential part of that. And you know, the little medallions are all hexagons, and if you start dividing them up, you can actually, just by drawing lines, you suddenly swing, and it looks three-dimensional on the paper. It's really interesting. So, you know, my favourite shapes really. It's great.
That's beautiful, Josie. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Right, so our next artist that we're going to speak to is Linda Knight, who made this amazing piece right there. Yeah. So yeah, if you could tell us a little bit about your background and
Yeah,
also the reasoning and the inspiration for the artwork.
Sure. Well, my history, I guess, is not unlike most of what people have been talking about already, which is, you know, the kind of generational practices that get passed down. So, like both of you, I had, my grandmother especially was an amazing textile maker and repairer. I come from a family of lace makers. I'm from the Midlands in the UK, and similarly, my grandmother made these extremely fine crochet lace pieces, and always being surrounded by textiles and enjoying sewing and learning to make really laid the foundation for the practice I have today. I also am a drawer, so I have two main practices that I explore my ideas through, I'm interested in how both of those allow me to think about. I have a real fascination with mapping, but kind of counter mapping or experimental mapping. So subverting the Western maps that we're most familiar with and the reasons for those maps, and the appearance of those maps, those paper documents, and they're often digital now. And how across the world there are many groups who have other ways of mapping, and that continues in their particular cultural circumstance, and how ideas of the land and place are understood, memorized, passed on, communicated, and how land is oriented through different cultures. And so this idea of mapping is something I explore both through drawing and through textiles. And so this is a mapping. It's a form of mapping. And the project, this is the first of 3 works that will all look quite similar but have different statements on the front. It particularly references inscriptions of land and over inscriptions of land by colonial. You can hear from my accent, I'm from Britain, and I'm very interested in exploring my ancestral, what my ancestors did in Australia, and the impacts of colonisation that we kind of enacted. And so the textiles are from domestic textiles, the souvenir tea towels and the souvenir tablecloths that were made, and how the imagery on those kind of re-inscribed how the land was thought of previous to colonisation, and so how these became the versions of the land that we begin to understand. So if you've ever bought a souvenir tea towel, it might be that you've gone to a place because it has a certain landmark or a certain production that it is famous for, or it's a beach, you know, and it is known. And so for those other things. And the reason I've used these textiles is because the project is about the stolen wages situation, which if you're in Queensland, certainly you might have heard of this probably more readily than other parts of Australia, although it did happen in other parts of Australia. But particularly the stolen wages was a class action that was brought by essentially First Nations people who had been placed at the Cherbourg Mission in Queensland, and an initiative by the then State Premier Jodie Peterson in Queensland to place young people in domestic service, or as to do mustering. So the young girls were placed in domestic service and the young boys were placed on to do like farm work or mustering. And he persuaded families to release their children into this domestic service through the promise of payment. And so each young person was given a pay book issued by the government, and they would then work and be paid, although they never saw the actual money. And they weren't allowed to receive cash from the farms that they were placed in. So If the farmer or the what's it called, the station folks actually wanted to give them more money, they were actually fined. The station folks were fined by the government for giving these young people extra money. And over time, they could see the balance in their pay book increase, but they never actually saw the money. And what happened in Queensland is that money was used to build the Ipswich Hospital, so the wages were never given to the young people. And so over time, a lot of campaigning and lobbying by First Nations families who had been raised in Cherbourg Mission enacted a class action that was successful, and they Jodie Occupation was long gone by then, but they successfully claimed against the class action. And so all of this event kind of raised a lot of issues and feelings for me as somebody who's also from Britain and has made a life here in Australia, and how I initially went through a thought process that would be very common, I think, which is, gosh, how must those young people felt being taken away from their families, placed on these farms? Sometimes the places were not nice, sometimes they were. So sometimes they were treated very kindly and sometimes they were, but they had no choice in where they could go, and they were often moved around. I read about this through the book Not Just Black and White, which is by Leslie and Tammy Williams. There's a mother and daughter, and Leslie had grown up on the Cherbourg Mission, and she tells in this book, which is like a conversation between her and her daughter about that time in her life and working as in domestic service. And so I did the thing that I think a lot of people like me would do, which is, gosh, I wonder how that must have felt. That's really, it must have been really quite scary. Blah, blah, blah. What I realised is I was doing what a lot of white folks do, which is slowly removing myself from the picture and projecting my thoughts and ideas onto the experiences of the young people. And what I wanted to do was make a work that actually directly addressed the white people in the room and brought us back into that picture and say, look at what we did, look at what we were part of. And so it addresses the white folks rather than addressing or attempting to claim any kind of, I understand what it must have been like for you as a young person, because clearly I can't claim what that must be like. And so it's about kind of a reparative practice. So not doing that aggressively, but actually making a work that actually says this is what we did as a part of this country's history. And although we might not have done that individually, we are part of that picture. And so it directly addresses our responsibility, our shared responsibility. And so the imagery is about domesticity and how domesticity was presented in certain ways that might not have been very comfortable for the young people. So for example, the ways of caring and repairing enacted through these, the references through the textiles, was a different kind of set of practices that they would have had they grown up within Indigenous culture. So for example, the idea of caring for young, repairing the fabrics was something that was very much in the practices of the place they were in, rather than where they were, what they would have learned had they stayed at home. And so there's a tension that I find very interesting in this notion of the domestic and the caring, but it's actually not, it's not all that it seems. And so it's about the work, and the three works with their different statements will be about just provoking us to think a little bit more about those tensions and how that must be. The reparative practice is the work, each of the pieces takes about a year to make. It's about 900 hours. and it's every single thing you see there is hand stitched. It's not fancy embroidery stitches. It's a very plain running stitch that I've done pretty much for the whole thing, and it's not about the stitching. It's about the act of committing to making the work, and so the reparative practice is that the long-term commitment I feel I must make to thinking about these histories and my kind of cultural role in that, if you like, and so. So the work is through its actions rather than its appearance, that notion of a reparative practice. And just, the colours, the three works, it's just an embroidery thread that I've used on the top. They're three colours of the ochres that you find in different parts of Australia. This one is the very bright red, the red ochre. The one I'm working with at the moment has the yellow, so it'll have a different sheen on it. And then the third work will have the very dark umber, that very beautiful dark brown ochre colour. So the three together will have a different sheen of the country that we're on, running through it.
I've spoken to Glenys in the past and other textile artists about the meditative nature of textile and being able to sit and sew but is this piece, is it just, I mean, you've said that once you've started, you have to finish, you're obligated to finish. Is it hard, is there a sense of, guilt's probably not the word I'm looking for, but as you're stitching, is it just hard because that's the idea behind the piece?
Yeah, it is, but it's not kind of aggressive, like it's a commitment, but it's a gentle, caring action as well. But it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to think about those situations, and I think it's one of the big things. I can't speak for all white people, obviously, but for me as a white person, it's one of the most difficult things to face and think about with commitment and detail, and so for me it's uncomfortable, but I think it's a really important thing that I feel I need to do, and it's one way I can do that reparative practice. It's not the only way, but it's one way that I feel I can do that. And like everybody, I have a busy life, so I do this last thing at night after my work is finished and the dinner is done and all of that, and I'd spend about 3 hours a night working on it each night.
That's amazing. And 900 hours. Are you gutted by the time? When you finish, has it just taken so much out of you? Like, I can just see it. I just be so, no.
The calluses are interesting, and the RSR bit is a little, but I think they're almost like small prices to pay, considering the privileges I enjoy, and so I think, it's definitely. I think it brings all of those different ideas and thoughts and experiences into my life on a continual basis, and that to me is meaningful rather than just again thinking about things.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Thank you. Is there any questions? No? Will it annoy you later?
Yeah.
That's what happens after these. Everyone kind of just lunges at the artist, So our next artist, who also works with text, is Jem Olsen. She's made this amazing piece here. So if you could just discuss a little bit about, I suppose, your background and also the piece, which I felt, a sense of sadness, I suppose, afterwards. and I did that with lenders as well. And I think that's amazing about textile art, is that it can do that. Emotionally triggered, it can trigger something. And so, yeah, if you'd like to talk about that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jem, I'm a textile artist and activist, or artivist. I really
I like that.
I remember being asked that question earlier in the year, do you identify as a craftivist? And even though I recognise that term and that approach, I don't know, there's something about that actual word that doesn't quite sit right for me. So, and I think it comes about from really wanting to have textiles and textile art seen as art. It is art to me. I feel I am an artist, and so that's how I guess I've really come to identify myself now. So, this piece, wow, let it in. I guess similar to a few others here, probably all of us, there's a strong generational aspect to craft, to sewing, on both sides of my family, even though I never really had the opportunity to meet and get to know my paternal grandmother, who that's her contributions. She apparently was an amazing dressmaker. So I kind of feel like there's a certain sense of legacy that continues through myself and hopefully my own daughter in the future. Anyway, I was a teacher. I worked a bit in international development, which was amazing. And then got to a point in my life about 12 years ago, I think. Maybe it was a bit less. I recognised that I wasn't allowing enough creativity in my life. And I think too, I remember feeling at the time that if I didn't have the opportunity to have children myself, I would need to find something to nurture. There's a real sense of wanting to nurture something. And so I had the opportunity to study textile design at IATB, which was amazing. And again, that sense of nurture, I felt very nurtured by the teachers that I had there, my fellow classmates, some of whom I founded a textile collective with, Tenfold Textile Collective, which is amazing. And we put on a few shows since our studies, which have been really magical experiences. I think for me, in terms of if I was to be asked, well, what medium do you work in? And for me, it's really all about the story. And I let the story determine the materials, the process, and the medium that I'll work in. And it was very much so with this piece too. And it's very, it has a lot of personal significance, this piece, but I'll try and keep it short. So I was approached at the end of 2019, I think it was, by the Arts and Culture team in the Ballarat City Council. So I'm from Ballarat. And they were going to put on an exhibition the following April. And so I was asked if I'd be interested in making a piece for that exhibition. And I immediately, the history of Eureka has always been a fascination to me. My favourite subject in high school was history. I loved Australian history in my Year 12 studies. The teacher I had was fantastic, just goes to show the importance of the teachers in your life. And I was really, something was taking me back to wanting to actually spend time again with that period in history. And funnily enough, the idea that I had at the time was actually being done by another local artist, something similar. So I thought, oh, okay, all right, well, I'll leave that idea. I was still really keen to do something about Eureka, and a close friend of mine she lent me this amazing book by Professor Claire Wright, who's a historian at La Trobe University. Forgotten Rebels of Eureka. And it was such an illumination to me, because when I studied Australian history, it was imprinted on us as students that it was only men who were there at that time in Ballarat, white men, I would say. There was an absence of women on the goldfields. That was what we were told. That was what the history books were telling us, and so it was quite a revelation to me to hear some of the stories of these amazing women who were living at that time in Ballarat, and just all of what led to the Eureka Rebellion and massacre, because that's essentially what it was. And I will never forget, I couldn't put this book down. It was incredible. And I remember even before starting to read the book, I just knew that whatever I would get the inspiration for, whatever it was that I was going to do, it was going to come from that book. And it was about 5 o'clock one morning, and I came across this story of Catherine McClister, an Irish immigrant who had come to Australia with her husband, who was engaged as a police officer on the goldfields. And as you can probably read in the text, it tells of her story and her wanting to make a formal complaint about what had happened to her. And I think, the more that I think about it, I think that there's a lot that's kind of gone on that isn't fully expressed in this, the more that I've thought about it. Anyway, I came across her story and I had a very strong emotional response to it. 2019 for me was a very difficult year. There was a lot of grief and trauma and sadness. And I immediately identified, I don't know if that's the word. I just remember feeling like, oh, what I would do to sit with this lady, Catherine, and just be able to talk to her, because she would understand some of what I've been through. Oh my God, and so there was that point in that morning, and I remember I had to go down to Geelong for work that day. And so I think I was telling you yesterday, in the space of actually driving from Ballarat to Geelong, it's about an hour, I saw that piece. I knew what I wanted to do. It was like, oh my goodness, Eureka, that's it, that's what I wanted. And I really wanted really to help amplify her story, even though Claire Wright did a magnificent job of bringing her story to the forefront in her book. There was just this desire to really, honour her, I think. And so, what happened? So I actually had, what I did was I typed the text in a kind of old school font, printed it, and then blew it up with a projector, and that's how I was able to write it on the fabric. So it's just calico, and for me, I knew it needed to be calico because of that real impression of she would have been living in a tent, and there would have been an intensity, and I really strongly play on that word, given what we're talking about in your piece before there, Josie. And then, it was summer. It was a few weeks before the actual uprising there at Eureka, so there's a real strong sense of an energy there in Ballarat. And I quickly realised that it was going to take me a long time to actually do the stitching for this piece, because I only had about, I think, 3 months by that stage to actually get a finished piece done. So I ended up doing a smaller version of it, which I call my sampler piece, which has actually been on show with Tamara and Evangeline in the Stitch and Change exhibition that Tamara helped organise, which was awesome. And then COVID happened. And I was actually, it was a suggestion of a couple of my tenfold mates who were like, well, maybe you could give it a go, Jen, and see where it leads you. And then, I mean, who was to know back then at just how much we'd been in lockdown? Yeah. And I was working from home at that time, and I just fell in love with that meditative process of, especially going through winter in Ballarat, it kind of, I'd get my blanket of calico and I'd be there in front of the fire and stitch. You know, it might have been just a letter or a word, or over the weekends, it might be a full length of a line. I remember kind of pacing myself with pins. I'd mark, you know, okay, after this month, I want this amount done, and so on. And what was kind of spooky was it, so all up it took me about 8.5 months to do. And I really wanted it, I had a very clear idea of how I wanted it photographed. One of the great things was on some of those really random sunny days in Ballarat, I'd actually take this piece down to Camp Street, which is where Catherine would have been living at the time, to sit with her. And I really feel like it was a collaborative effort between her and I over time. It was just, yeah, and so that opportunity to sit there at the site and be with her was pretty magical. I think that there was a recognition that I needed to take some time out to heal myself, and that idea of stitch as emotional repair very much sits deep with me, especially with this piece. And what was really kind of spooky about it was at the time that, so I finished this piece, it was photographed a couple of weeks later. I didn't realise at the time, but I was 2 weeks pregnant, and I had been told that I probably would never be able to have children. So it was, it has a very, and knowing what happened to Catherine after her complaint was dismissed, she ended up going to Geelong with her husband, which one can only assume her husband lost his job once she made this complaint. She actually died in childbirth with her first child. And I love the fact that this is going to Geelong to hopefully give her. I've tried finding out where she may have passed away or be buried in Geelong, and haven't been successful. So I love the fact that this is going to give a chance to be it. Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this piece.
It's just brilliant.
And I think as someone pointed out last night, yeah, there's a little bit of hidden text in there.
Yeah.
Which I think what was interesting is, so during 2020, as I was making this, it was a real year of uprising turbulence, you know, with George Floyd, what had happened to him. And that phrase was what I was feeling in response to that, as well as a lot of people. And no doubt would have been the feeling of a lot of people living at the goldfields prior and during the uprising that happened and following. And it still, to a certain degree, remains in Ballarat. It's a really interesting town. This real sense of rebellion, but yet there's a real conservative element to it as well. So it kind of, but that's kind of, essentially the piece.
acknowledge that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I love the fact that this piece is being shown with some incredible works, and there are parallels even with these works. So,
I'm loving this generational thing too. I find that amazing.
Yeah.
That connection.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway. Sorry. Sorry. Okay, next. We have Tamara. There you go. Okay, so if you could tell us a little bit, obviously, about your background and the piece. So Tamara's piece are the two beautiful sculptural works, and I really enjoyed, as a sculptor myself, the addition of so much sculpture. In textile art, as opposed to that kind of traditional quilting and whatnot. How wonderful that it's, there's all this sculpture around. So
my background is, again, a mother who did everything. She died with the biggest stash, she won. So I don't think anyone could outbeat my mother's stash. But so I inherited a lot of that. And I've always sewn since I was tiny. I found my old gingham tablecloth that I was sewn with the cross stitch. So that came out at Christmas, actually, laid out on the table. And all that way through, so I'm 61, and in my day, Sports Girl opened when I was about 19. And that was the first place you could go and buy young fashion. So we made our own clothes because there was no other option. So I've always done that and redone patterns. I was a spinner, a really bad knitter, and I love weaving. So I lived in the UK for a long time, so I had big looms there, and trained my children to do the same stuff. And the wonderful thing about living in the UK was that textile art is a really accepted practice, and it has been for like 30 years. So when I came back to Australia in 2003, it was a real shock that people didn't accept textile art as being an art practice, really. And I would try and enter shows and be told, we don't take cross stitch, and I'd say, well, I don't do cross stitch, so that's okay. But they still wouldn't accept the work. And that's been changing slowly, and part of why I founded NEM Textile Collective, which is a collective of Victorian artists. And we are all on Facebook and we chat, and we've had our first show, which was supposed to be October 21, lockdown. We went online, we had the show in February 2022, it was fantastic. We had 32 artists and nothing was the same. It was just extraordinary. And so that's been building. I'm mainly did free machine embroidery as my main practice. And in COVID in 2020, I had favourite ceramic vase and I broke it. So I looked at kintsugi, and I was going to glue it back together with gold paint. But of course the shops were all shut. There was nothing there. And back in 2019, Phillips Shirt Makers, I don't know if any of you know that, it was a big company of shirt makers in Middleburg Street, and they shut down, and you could go in there and take whatever material you wanted for free because they just were going to burn it all. So they had lots of silk and just beautiful textiles of silk, and I came away with this massive bag and felt a bit guilty that I was taking so much silk. Now I regret it because I've used most of it. I should have taken more. But I was eco-dyeing it and having lots of fun playing around with dyes. So when I'd broken my vase, I sat there and thought, I've got this material and I've got thread, and so I sewed my vase back together again. And people thought that was really weird. So I called it Textile Kintsugi, and it's kind of gone on. I've been making more and more pieces. And this piece, I went into Helping Hands charity shop, and there were these two vases. And they just reminded me, my sister had passed away in 2019, and they kind of reminded me of two sisters. So that was where, so I basically smashed them apart, and they deliberately lean. So when I first sewed them, they were nice and straight, but I actually wanted them to lean together. So that's why
I mean, if you pick it up, they're a bit wonky to get that lean. And so it's that linkage of sisters, and the holes are quite deliberate that, you know, none of us are perfect. And then, yeah, sewing them back together, and the linkages on the top of the metal, which is Viking knit. And yeah, it was just that memory, because my sister was diagnosed in 2014 with breast cancer, came out of it, it came back aggressively and she died. But the year before she died, I got diagnosed with breast cancer. So we had that link. I'm getting emotional now. So yeah, it's just all about, you know, that cherishing love, togetherness. And it's a crazy thing to do, but it's lots of fun.
Okay, because I'm a bit of a dill when it comes to the textile art. Can you tell me about how you do that?
Yeah, so
Sorry, because when I was picking up, it's kind of, because you said it's ceramic, but as I was moving it around the gallery, it's flexible.
yeah, they are, and basically they're really hard to re-break once, because I have a big piece that's up in Tamworth at the moment, I've got a shop there, and you can pretty much drop them because of the flexibility of sewing them back together. They're actually really hardy. So people think they're really fragile, but they're actually quite hardy, which is part of the thing of them is that, you know, we rebuild with strength. We have faults, but we rebuild. Through 2020, I did a series of 4 pieces, and it was about the fires, because a lot of my work has some sort of political meaning. I mean, I worked in sustainability in both UK and Australia in government for 25 years, and people are only taking notice now, so it frustrated the crap out of me that, you know, 30 years later, we're only just starting to do something about saving our planet. So I did this Shattered, and it was about the fires and the fact that, you know, people's lives were broken apart and put back together with their cracks and breaks and holes, and, you know, that whole vulnerability we all experience watching people's homes burn. And so it kind of came on there, and then when I saw these 2 pieces, it was just sisters. And basically what I do is I smash it, and then it's a big jigsaw puzzle. So because you don't know, I use this great big heavy mallet. So once you bash it down, you have no idea what's going to happen.
How satisfying.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And so, you know, you end up with big pieces, little pieces, some pieces that shatter and you can't reuse. Sometimes I glue them back together because there's too small pieces. And then it's covered with the silk, stitched together. Then I stitch the vase back together, and then I overdo it with the herringbone stitch to create so you really see those cracks. And some of the pieces, at the moment I'm doing this massive vase, and it's taking some because there's just too many pieces. And so, you know, sometimes I will try and kind of sticky tape them back before you start sewing it. Other times with this piece, you just got to guess. And some pieces are really obvious, and other pieces I'm like, so it's just a really slow process. They take a lot of time to put together because kind of it's got that 3 processes of stitching them back. But
What a great result.
and again, I think what I'm saying, it's very meditative because you're just concentrating totally on this piece. I tend to listen to music. I love listening to music when I stitch, and so I can just go into this meditation. And, you know, with this one, it was really healing because it was so recent that my sister passed, that it's just really nice to put it back together.
Thank you. Lovely. And so now we have Evangeline. I have to go get your piece. Hang on. Okay. I'm just going to stand. I am. This is a beauty thing.
I'm all tired.
I can do stuff. Yeah.
I'm very tired.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk because I'm feeling so emotional. I'm really I really had to
fight back those tears while you were speaking. And like normally when I talk about my work, I kind of leave it generic or in the head, but I'm feeling more comfortable and vulnerable with you guys, but I'll try to keep it in. Okay, so I'm actually primarily a painter. So I've been painting since my teenage years and only started working in textiles in 2020. I think a lot of us had changes around that time, did the COVID shift in our practice. But it really stems much, much further than that. So the beginning of the story is I was born in Australia. And when I was around 5, I got abducted by my father and ended up living in Spain. He buggered off and left me at my grandmother's house with my sister, and so my grandmother raised me. And we did not get along. We were like, just butted heads like crazy. I was just angry and violent, as you can imagine, and she didn't understand it. And she thought to curb this erratic behavior, she would put me in sewing classes. I kind of fell in love with painting and didn't look back. I just sewed clothes, probably until I was a teenager, and then I honestly didn't touch the needle and thread until 2020. So come 2020, I, like all of us, we were looking for things to do on how to help, right? So I started this mask project and just sewed thousands and thousands of masks. And after it was, came to light that, hey, they don't actually do anything, the cotton masks. I stopped doing that. And, but I had all this energy, like sewing energy. It was doing something for me. We talked a lot about healing, meditation. It was doing all of those things. And so I just sat down and started embroidering. I didn't think much about what I was going to do. I had been staining cloth, so I stained it and then just started embroidering over the top of it, and they just kind of developed from there. And about my grandmother, because she was born in 1915, so she would have gone through the 1918 pandemic. And the more I did the embroidery, the more I felt like this sense of healing of that relationship, like I was going through time and connecting with her. So I felt this compulsion to keep healing. And I feel like the more embroidery I'm doing, the more I'm healing that relationship. I'm healing my relationship with Australia because, coming back to Australia, having this accent where people are constantly asking where I'm from, and I have to so I'm living here, I'm Australian, but I'm not, and so reconnecting with that side of myself. I think embroidery is giving me that sense of connection, especially with this piece, which I don't know if you can tell, but it's an Australian landscape. Like, it's an internal landscape as well. It's got the colors, that you normally associate, but then I lived in Queensland for a long time, so you get like the rainforest colors on the side, as well as like these imaginary landscapes that are like, so like when you're meditating and you go to that place that gives you safety, like in your imagination, that's kind of what they are to me. And I'm being more conscious the more embroidery I create of the impact of the healing, and making an effort to like direct it to things. And for me, it's working, and I hope that when people see them, like they feel that sense of healing in them. The end. Are your arms tired?
No, they're not too bad. Can you not talk until I get back?
Yeah.
Pretty sure I said not to talk, but that's all right. Oh my gosh. Gosh, can everyone just scrape themselves up off the ground? You must be incredibly proud. How amazing.
How amazing.
How amazing.
I just said to Tamara, I wish everyone was here.
Oh, and so they should be. We should have a massive hall or something, I don't know.
I'd like to thank you all because I've got a exhibition coming up for a local gallery. The topic is women, or woman, I think, and I've got 2 solutions to what I'm going to put in, all from being inspired by you. So thank you very much.
Can I just, excuse me, Kristen, can I just ask you to ask Sue?
Ask Sue first. I was going to make you talk, but yes, I'm going to, yes. Sue, you speak first. Yes.
Ask me what?
How bloody hard it was.
Oh, yeah.
That's hilarious. Yes. How hard was it?
It was hard. It is hard. It's for me. I think what Glenys has created is amazing. The concept of the Biennale is fantastic to have a significant prize. But
Yay me.
I'm sorry. But there's a little bit here that thinks everybody should have got a prize. Because we you know, it's not that there's one, it's not like maths where there's a right answer, there are multiple right answers. And to come into a space and look at all of this and then, well, you've got to pick, you know, it's not easy. It's not easy. And so, do you want me to say about what I thought?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was coming in and thinking, which things hit you, which things, and, you know, there were lots of things, lots of things you could choose from. So, you know, easy. It's not easy. And I do think, in some ways, having to pick something is kind of a bit, you know, I'm not saying, yeah, that we shouldn't do it, but it is hard because there is no right answer when you're making art. There's multiple right answers, and we're surrounded by multiple right answers here today. Powerful pieces that have got something to say to us. And some of them are saying it in very subtle ways, and you have to read them more than once, or you have to look very closely. Yeah. And sometimes, you know, I mean, we've just been treated to all of those extra layers. That, yeah, that's a privilege to know what goes on inside somebody's head and somebody's heart when they're making a piece of work. So thank you to everybody too.
Yeah, it was so good.
I feel incredibly privileged to be here today. Gosh almighty. I am.
You right there?
Yeah,
Would you like a
I'm
drink?
emotional. That was a very big week.
She's exhausted. You're exhausted.
I'm a little bit tired. It's been God, I've enjoyed this. Glenys, I'm going to make you talk. Come on, this is your doing. Off you go.
Well, I've been working with women involved in textile arts since about 1978. So it's just a short blip in my life, but it's a huge world. And in the last 25 years, I've been really concerned that Australia did not have an input on textile art, even though I was in the inaugural Tamworth Textile Exhibition. I was on the very first committee of that in 1978 or 9, something like that, and worked with that for about 10 or 15 years, but couldn't see how it was going to work when basically the artists that were being selected for that had university degrees, and they came from a totally different aesthetic from how textiles were seen. So anyway, I then decided that probably in 2002, that it was time that we had something that would show art textiles rather than quilts or quilt arts. I just wanted another vision, and I didn't want to have the same vision as what the Tamworth Triennial had, because there's room for all of this. And when you said yes, it was like, oh my God, now what am I going to do? Because I knew I'd been doing tiny little exhibitions and travelling them around Australia, but only tiny little ones. And I thought, well, if I can just boost that up and make it bigger, and then turn it into an international, then that would work. So over the period of time when the
Just like that. Yeah.
Over the period of time when suddenly you have internet and everything is not being posted out, with a stamp, that you're able to contact with more and more and more people. And during the time that Fibre Arts Australia started to grow in 2003 and 2004, it meant that by the time we got to 2019, I had quite a massive conglomeration of people to choose from. And I would say that with subscriptions and Facebook and Instagram, and I know they're horrid things, but for me, I'm reaching out to more than 55,000 people. That's just on a personal basis. And then I thought, if we can open this up internationally, because within Australia there was a lot of exhibitions that a cookmaker could go to, a small artist could go to. There were some fibre art workshops happening, but I thought if I can open this up with absolutely no parameters. The only rule was that it couldn't be any wider than 2 meters. When you really come down to that, it can be anything. And then when I sent it out in 2019 and ended up having it in 2021, I was blown away with the amount of people who had entered then, and it was probably 179 or something or other entered, and I thought, well, this is pretty good. And then found selectors to do the selecting for me, because I would have loved to have selected it myself, but I felt that I was too close to what was going on. So I selectors to do the very first selection process, which is what happened in 2021. The same thing happened this year. But this year, there was 278 entries from 25 countries. And so I can now see that it's growing and growing and growing. But what is changing is the perception of what artists can bring into this sphere of work. And it just blows my mind. When everything was coming in, there were so many remarkable pieces, and you're just looking at it online, and then you blow it up and you see what's within these works. And then you send them to selectors who have a different view to what you have. And then the results come back. And with those results coming back, I had to then distance myself, because that wasn't, there was some things that were selected, that weren't selected, that I thought, oh, why did they put that in and why did they put that in? But I had no say in that process. And so when we came here on Wednesday, and all of the pieces had come in, that's the other thing, everything must be posted. And so the parcels were coming.
Oh,
They
great though, textile art. It's not these huge crates or anything.
Also hard. For example, I know that you have the particular size from Australia Post. And,
I know.
And what I really wanted to do was roll my piece up, because I'm a quilt maker as well.
Yeah.
But I couldn't.
It is hard, but then that
But I understand why.
Yeah.
Because it's got to travel.
It is. And anyway, when we came in and things were sort of all just not hung like this, I must admit. But they were just around, and we walked around and tried to look, and I thought, oh yeah, there's some good pieces in here. Oh yeah, they're all right. No, I'm being honest. No, truly, because I've never seen them before. And I'm being true. Oh gosh, why did that one get in? And then when we came in on Thursday afternoon, it was like this wonderful young woman here had waved her magic wand, And she put up this remarkable collection of art textiles that it's blown me away, absolutely blown me away, because now they've been given their space. They have, you can stand in front of a piece of work and you can have the empathy with it, and you can have the feeling of, shit, I want to know how to do that. I don't know how to do this stuff. I didn't know what this, whatever that tensegrity was, or whatever. And you know, I thought I knew a lot about textiles and how you do stuff, but there's so many different techniques in here that I have got no idea, absolutely no idea how it's done. So all of a sudden, with from the 275 pieces, we ended up with these 35 pieces, and it's extraordinary. But the best bit was listening to you, beautiful 6 people, talk about where it's come from. This is what art textiles and fibre and whatever you want to call it, this is where it comes from. You can't sit down and make a ladder unless you have a feeling that there is something about that ladder. You can't sit down and embroider words like this unless you know it's coming from here. You can't do that until you've got all of that emotion in your body that brings you to tears, Bobby, all the time. I don't teach anymore. I work with women in masterclasses where I mentor. And the stories that I hear from each individual woman and see what they produce, it's like a movie slowly coming out in front of me, because they're telling me of what's in here. And how do I put it out there? And this show is exactly that. It's women sitting at their dining room table, or in their backyard, or when you were driving to Geelong, you had all this thought. It's all of that process that happens, and then you know that you can make something that comes from here. It's not just slapping on a bit of paint, that'll do. It's the thought process that is the most important thing.
Can I ask a tricky question? Having had a father who worked in various forms of fibre all his life, were there any men? Were there any men who entered?
Yeah.
Because you're always talking about women.
Yeah, there's one.
One.
No, not one.
There was
One selected.
One selected.
But there was about 9 or 10, 15 men. Yeah, no, they are about. Yeah, and it's not, this exhibition is not designed just for women artists only.
No, I'm just interested if we've got the message, or how many are out there.
No, there's a lot out there. There is a lot out there.
But it's interesting, I know what you mean, but this generational thing, I think because it comes from your mother and your grandmother, it just seems to, I suppose.
It does.
Because I've lived a non-gender specific life.
Sorry?
I've lived a non-gender specific life, I think, and I think, you know, everything should be open to everybody. Don't disturb them.
This show is definitely
Just a comment, looking at everyone in the room, I'm a bit concerned about our age.
Why?
Well, because
I'm sorry.
Or does it take maturity to produce it, perhaps?
Well, no, when we had the Stitching Change show, it was, the youngest artist was 16, and the oldest artist was 92 or something.
Oh, wow.
And we had a lot of young people coming through, and they had their first sales, and it was just wonderful. So no, I think it's cross-generational.
And as grandmothers, I think we are just passing that on again to our
So, I heard that it's coming back in 2025, just yesterday.
There's no room. There's no room in the exhibition calendar. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get the Of course.
One of the biggest things this year is that it's travelling, and it's going far and wide. and the furthest wide it's going is to Adelaide. But it's going to, the other thing that I'm really passionate about is regional galleries. When you grow up in Tamworth, there's only one gallery, and you have to support that one gallery, and they still support textiles. And when I put out an expression of interest to galleries, I went to regional galleries, and I visited regional galleries, and I visited small galleries that were in a region, not even a regional gallery, so small galleries that are in a region, and would you take it? And they just all put their hand up and said, yes, let's do it. And I think when this starts to move, I know that we're going to have a lot of people come down. Everyone says, why Bensdale? And I'm not going to answer that question anymore. No.
Why not?
It's sort of, why not? And I do know the numbers do increase. Last year, when it was here first, was huge. Then it went to Toowoomba.
But yes, it was, yeah.
Toowoomba is a huge regional gallery that pulls from a lot of places. And in the first 2 weeks of that exhibition being in Toowoomba, they had 3 months normal attendance. And they were just blown away with what was going on. The reason people come is because it's textile. Whatever you show anywhere that has something of textile to do with the exhibition, people seem to come because it's textile. But I am just so grateful. I have a great time doing it all. It can be quite stressful. But it's I can tell you now that I've been working on this since 2021. So this is the culmination of all those years of work. And the next Biennale will be in 2025, and it's started already, because we need to get things rolling again. So I just want to thank you all. I want to thank you all, because without you, we wouldn't be here. And without you, my darling.